thank you all once again, and I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, CEO, and founder, Jeffrey Wilcox, to get us started with today's session.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? We are so excited to have you with us. I know that each one of you is contemplating, do I want to pay for this academy? Do I want to spend 8 weeks learning about this subject? What's there to teach? You know, the goal of today's session is this is not a seminar. This is not a webinar. This is not a training. This is a group of people coming together to decide whether you would like to be in our academy or not. And so we want to go over all of your questions and answer as much as we can to have the right decision for you. But I'll tell you, we've spent 22 years preparing the kitchen table for a place for you at the table. Over the past 22 years, since I served as an interim executive director for the second largest HIV advocacy organization in West Hollywood, and then became interim executive director of a large foundation, we've spent 22 years preparing to share with you what we've learned about organizations in transition and how our work as interim professionals can take organizations to higher ground in their service to others. And we're very proud to welcome you to what is the largest organized community of trained interims that exists in the world. There's over 600 of us that have completed the academy, and I hope by the end of the hour, you'll want to join with us in that effort. Without further ado, because this is a bit of an overview, please know that the Academy is not a series of talking heads. We are a group of people that have formed a learning organization about how to help organizations that are in transition to make the best decisions for their organizations in their service to others. But because today is a bit of an overview, we will not have the breakout groups. We will not have things that you would find in webinars, but please know our learning style is a community cohort learning style, and we're very proud of that at Third Sector Company. Well, with those caveats in mind, let me tell you a little bit about our program. And it does take just one more shot here to be able to do this. It's the slideshow from the current. Can everybody see that okay? What we're going to talk about today is this thing we call the Interim Executives Academy. And really, what we're talking about is methodical transitional leadership. And we define community impact organizations as charitable organizations, trade and professional associations, labor unions, congregations, and other groups of people who've come together under a purpose or a stated mission to accomplish something to make the world better, in their opinion, for others. With that caveat, the Interim Executive Academies has become a conduit for learning and linking and leading what strategic transitional leadership looks like across the United States and Canada. I'm happy to tell you, you also, if you choose to be with the Academy, are joining interims also in Africa. They're looking at how to provide transitional leadership to organizations at worldwide organizations. Let me tell you who you are before I tell you who we are. I hope everybody can see this. I recognize the print is small, but bear with me. What you represent is what the class is all about. I'm going to tell you what we're going to teach, but it's what you see on the screen is what we're going to learn. We're going to learn from people representing 26 of the 50 states and 2 Canadian provinces. The people who have chosen to join us today, I want you to see just a sampling of the backgrounds, whether current or former, that they represent. The AARP Foundation to the County Bar Association. We have someone representing background with the Queer Cultural Center, the Natural Museum of Los Angeles. We're thrilled to have someone from the North Carolina Alliance of Black School Educators. We're especially honored from Canada to have the Tell Us Friendly Future Foundation. We have a representative today from the Rockefeller Foundation, people who represent local Boys and Girls Clubs in United Ways, the Vermont Food Bank, and the Washington State Charter Schools Association. And that's only a sampling. The beauty of the Academy is the diversity of people, where they live, the work that they have done, and their desire to work with organizations and people to find higher ground in their service to others. That's who you are. I hope all that alone is like, wow, I didn't realize that this community was so broad and represented such a diversity of people. Here's what we're going to do for the next hour. I hope this is what you've come to learn, and be prepared. My teaching style is I am going to present a concept, and then I'm just going to ask, Is this working for folks? So what we've planned for the next hour is let's talk about this interim leadership thing. Don't tell me what you're going to teach yet. Tell me what you understand this work to be. So that's what we're going to answer. What has the market taught us about interim leadership? What are the critical leadership challenges that our interims are facing today? Why in the world would you spend 8 weeks talking about this? Why an academy? And the secret is 8 weeks is just the beginning. What are you going to teach based on all of these caveats? And we've also asked a recent graduate to come and share with you about their experience of the academy. Now, I want to stop here. I need to see a thumbs up. This is what I've come to talk about. Is this what you wanted to hear? If not, would you please put in the chat box those other items that are on your mind, either now or as we go through this. We'll answer your questions about the Academy and considering joining with our community of transitional leaders worldwide. With that in mind, and Joan and Randy, you've not met Randy Brinson yet. Randy Brinson is from our team at Third Sector. They're going to be monitoring the chat box. They will either respond in the chat box or they'll stop me and say, hey, Jeffrey, we got a question I think would benefit from some conversation, and I'll immediately want to honor that. Everyone belongs here. Your voice is important. Getting your questions answered is important. But when you have, over 50 people on the screen, we want to make sure that no one is left behind and you realize how valued you are in this community. Now, with saying that, let's move into what we're talking about. You use, in many words, we use the word interim. And you know what? It's been branded. We like to think of the brand is not about a interim being a go-between. An interim is a methodical, transitional leader. This profession isn't a place card holder. It's not something that, pulls two sides of something together as a fastener. Methodical, transitional leadership process. And what it really is doing, it's creating a bridge for the next generation of leaders to succeed. We built this academy around how do we lower the attrition rate that's occurring in the nonprofit sector by creating organizations that are ready to have good leaders, as opposed to totally lost until a leader gets there and finds out it was the wrong one. And when you look at attrition that occurs, I think there's some data points to be made about the rising levels of attrition. And do we as interim leaders have a responsibility to make sure that the right fit is taking place and not an easy or fast fit was tried to make happen, so an organization ends without a leader quicker than it could. Methodical transitional leadership is what interim is all about. And the outcome is a next generation of leadership that's ready to succeed. That's the premise. So what we've got to recognize is that transitional leadership cannot be business as usual. It is an intervention. It's an intervention in an organization that's looking for bridging its past with its future. And what we have to decide as a profession, what is our rightful role? What are our boundaries? And what risks can we take that neither our successor or predecessor took that will help an organization to deal with some tough questions about what they want to be in their next iteration? And can they find the next leader that will take them there? Well, the Interim Academy is a learning community. It is not just a series of webinars. Over the last 22 years, we've worked diligently to create a body of knowledge, to create a pocket of reference materials, because I make you this promise. If you choose to pursue a career as an interim professional in the not-for-profit sector, you will never have one single engagement that's like the other, because every organization is in a different community, is in a different market, is in a different place, and it's not a cookie cutter approach. What we have to bring is a logic model to chaos. And that is the premise that Interim Executives Academy is. What is a logic model for organizations and people that are experiencing transition? All right, I can only talk to a notebook for so long, everybody. How am I doing? Is this making sense to you? This is about helping organizations transition into what they want to become, not what we think they should become. Is everybody clear on that? And in that, it takes a process to do that. And for many of us who come from social work backgrounds, it's based on a logic model. And that's what we're going to teach in the academy about what is a logic model for organizations in transition. If everybody's ready to continue on this journey, because I'm extremely mindful that we are in a 1 hour program and it can't appear as a talking head. So let's just talk about this industry for a second. What many people who are not in the transition industry don't think about is when you talk about training for and preparing for a career in transitional leadership, what is the profession? What is the profession? And I have to tell you today, it is actually 10 different jobs that's within our profession. Let me go through these very quickly so that we all get an idea of what we're talking about. For most individuals, when they need an interim, it's probably the result of some sort of a succession. Someone's going to leave. Jeffrey has been in an organization for 20 years. He should have left 5. We all say that under our breath, but finally he's out of there. There's a voluntary succession that's taking place, and so we're going to need an interim. But you know what? I will say that in our years of doing business, most interims will fall into what's called an involuntary transition period, which is Jeffrey didn't know he was going to have a bad day, and his board thought he should have known for a long time he was going to have a bad day, and that day arrived. And what happened is the board chair called third sector company and said, you know what? Jeffrey's going to have a bad day on Friday about 1 o'clock. Do you have somebody available at 1:30? That's how we got into this business, through involuntary transition of following someone who has been an involuntary absence in the organization. But wait, there's more. We have interims today that are filling an important job of helping executives to plan for and have a leave of absence, whether that's for good reasons or sad reasons. But being able to have a leave of absence is necessary to have an interim that can help. What's different about a leave of absence interim is their predecessor and their successor will be the same person. And I have to tell you, when it comes to teaching interim management, this is something that we have to keep in mind that sets this apart from other interims. There are some organizations that have never had an executive before. We believe that a thoughtful, methodical interim can help a nonprofit to get used to having an exec before they hire one that becomes a casualty of their unfamiliarity of what it's like to have one. Did everybody follow me on that one? Organizations who've never had an exec before. There are interims that help to build systems and organizations to become accustomed to have an exec before one of our colleagues takes the job and adds to the high attrition rate because they just simply weren't ready. They thought they wanted one, but when they got one, it was a little tough. That's the inaugural interim. But wait, on the other side of the spectrum, there's the organization that's like, we're no longer going to be around and we need someone to put us out of business. This happens more than you may think. We have interims who are particularly talented in going through the dissolution process of nonprofits. That's a very specialized interim. Many times what happens is the founding executive will leave and it's no longer a sustainable, viable organization. And through a great deal of counsel and tears, we figure out it's time to put this organization in a different place because it can no longer exist in the place it was. The next kind of interim, the merger and consolidation interim, which is either we've lost our exec and we're going to merge with another organization and we need an interim to help us to get through the merger process, or we need an interim to be the first executive of a merged organization so the current execs are not vying with one another to get the job. We see this more and more now in post-COVID than we've ever seen before, which is what we call the merger and consolidation interim. Next up, we didn't know this existed until it knocked on our door. The court-appointed interim. The Superior Court of Los Angeles County called on third sector company because a prominent nonprofit organization filed for bankruptcy. And they determined that the best expert witness to determine if they could recover from bankruptcy would be an interim executive director. And we were able to prove to the Superior Court in bankruptcy cases that interim executives could prove to be the expert witness that they could, whether they file a Chapter 7, a Chapter 9, a Chapter 11, a Chapter 13, the interim executive can become an expert witness in organizations that are in a dissolution process. Two more. We have interims today that are beta COOs. How many of you know executive directors who probably should have had a chief operating officer for years, but they never took the plunge? Now, we could have some fun with the reasons why, but the fact of the matter is we now have interims who are saying, I will join you to create that COO position you need. And I'm going to give you some tough love because the way you're operating right now is that COO isn't going to be successful. But I'll come in as your peer and we'll work on this. And so we're seeing more and more interims that are becoming beta COOs in organizations so that they will have successful tenure. There's the temp to perm. I got to tell you, we don't like this one. This is not why we got into the interim business. But there are some nonprofits who just have not had a good luck with hiring execs. And so they're looking for a temp to perm situation to see if this is right. We also have some interims that are trying it. Keep in mind, what sets this one different is you're not really an interim, you're a candidate. And finally, we have people today who can be interim executive directors of organizations that are not in their local communities. We have, for an example, an interim executive director who's based in Anchorage, Alaska, that is an interim today for a trade association located in Berkeley, California. The reason why is because their membership is across the country. They don't need their interim to be located in Berkeley. So Rachel Morris is our interim executive director of the American Studies Association on the campus of the University of California at Berkeley. My question to all of you is, before we get into the academy, I hope you had an aha moment. The aha moment is, how do you have an academy where when each of you chooses to be an interim executive, you could walk into one of 10 situations. And I hope you agree, we would not want those 10 situations to be treated equally. They are all mission-based organizations that are trying to figure out what is their next chapter of service to other people. And we as interim executive directors have a responsibility to work with those individuals to help figure out what's the best decision for them and their organization. And we bring the skills to build the bridge. How am I doing so far? Is anybody ready to turn off their camera and say these folks have lost their mind? I hope not. The goal here, Joan, Randy, Tom, Dean, so there are other voices that are on the screen other than mine. Is there anything that you would add to this about the profession? Joan, you are head of our placement office. What are you seeing today in terms of all 10 of these?
Well, we know that one size doesn't fit all. And so interims have to be, I think, supremely adaptable to taking a method that you've learned and assessing this organization, which is a really key part of being a successful interim, and then taking the method and applying it to that very unique situation. We've all learned never to say that we've seen it all, because that next interim engagement is like, whoa, haven't seen anything quite like that. But having a method lets us adapt to any one of these scenarios. So yeah, we're adaptable. Key characteristic for an interim.
Jeffrey, I would just add that the thing that strikes me about all of this is how important it is for us to be thinking of interim leadership as a distinct profession. And you said this earlier, interim leaders, when they're truly serving as capacity builders for their organizations, they're not in there just to water the plants and simply keep the trains running. I mean, they have to do that, but there is so much more that the interim leader brings to an organization that is in a position of transition, which may be a stressful, dramatic position, may not be, but in any case, there's a real opportunity for capacity building here that doesn't exist in the same way for quote unquote permanent executives. So there's a real distinctive profession here that we have the opportunity to grasp.
And as all of you think about, what we're presenting here today, please put your thoughts in the chat box. This is resonating with me. This is not resonating with me. One thing that stuck out, feel free to express how this is landing with you so that we're mindful of, we're presenting information that's both useful, but setting a context of why an academy. Now I'm going to get even more complicated. So that's the work. We're going to call that the content. Now I want to talk about the context. If you choose as an academy graduate and work and our place as an interim, we did a poll of our interims in 2023. And we asked the question, what are you walking into? What are you walking into? And I'm not talking about, well, it's the COO, it's the court appointed. Now what I'm talking about is the environments that interims are walking into. And I want to walk around what I think are the 6 top environments that our interims are walking into. Number one, as we come out of the COVID environment, interim executive directors are faced with more of a relations problem with employees and the workplace environment and employee retention than any previous generation of interims. HR issues, or HR challenges, as it were, are some of the most significant challenges that interims are facing as they walk into the nonprofit workplace today. Does that surprise anybody? I hope it doesn't. And we as interims can't say, well, you know what, everybody just hang tight and we don't know when the next exec's going to be hired, but they'll take care of that problem. I don't think that's a very, very strategic transitional leadership answer, and I hope you would agree. And if a board is paying for an interim executive director to say, well, you know what, I'm going to turn my back on the employee relations and retention issue and leave that to somebody else, is probably going to have several board people scratching their head about, what are we doing here? Your number one issue that we're facing common across the board is an employee relations and retention issue. Number two, that organizations are moving from a position of advocacy to a position of activism. And there's no question about it. I don't care where you sit on the political spectrum. If you become an interim in 2024, you're going to be involved in organizations that are feeling very strongly about conversations that are taking place around the country around this national election. And if we as interims don't go into an organization realizing there may be uncivilized discourse, there will be discussions about that we agree with or disagree with personally and or professionally, that in 2024 as interim executives, we have to be prepared that the advocacy arm of the organization is really turning into an activist arm of the organization. And we have to be prepared as leaders to be able to manage that with wide open eyes and in a way that will bring civilized discourse to organizations of people with diverse opinions. Number three, when we become interims, we have to realize that nonprofit organizations are really rethinking their leadership models. That doesn't mean, oh, we've always had an executive director, so I guess we'll always have an executive director. Sometimes we need to talk about, is there a new shared leadership model that would work better for this organization as it thinks about where it wants to go? Do we need to not hire a CEO? We need to really start with a COO and a CEO. The leadership model can no longer be assumed as the right model for this organization to thrive in future generations. Now, that's not to say, the way everything's been done in the past is bad. That's not what we're saying at all. We're just saying as interims, we're walking into organizations that are really asking the question, is the way we've always structured this organization the way we should always structure it in the future? Is everybody clear on that understanding? I'm not asking for agreement here. I'm just saying, do you agree with it? Let me stop. I'm halfway through this. We're saying in 2024, if you become an interim, if you're not equipped to handle complex human resource issues and organizations that are going to be taking a stand in a presidential political year, we've kind of got our heads in the sand. Would you agree with that? We've got to recognize that's the leadership landscape that we're walking into. So next up, use of technology. When we started this academy, AI, we didn't know what that was. Was that a medical term? So the use of technology and organizations redefining what remote means for them, whether they're a local, a state, a regional or national, or international organization, you're going to be faced with questions about where do you see technology fitting into our future? And you're going to have to ask organizations that question. And when we ask organizations to think about their next generation of leaders, what role should technology play in the interviewing, screening, and job description process? For some organizations, it's totally moot. In other organizations, it's paramount. As not-for-profit interim executive directors, we had to be prepared. We had to prepare to confront bias, racism, and justice. And what that means is we have to be, as leaders, recognizing these forces of institutionalized bias and assumption. We have a choice. We either call it out, or we let it continue to percolate to the point that's really harmful to people and could turn away some candidates because they feel that the organization is not operating in a just environment and would be wrong for them as their next leader. We do have declining donor retention. As not-for-profit interims, we're going to be walking into organizations that are really trying to recover from no events to hybrid events to in-person events to, the whole fundraising piece is recalibrating. And I got to tell you, most of our customers are not wanting to put the fundraising function in neutral until the next executive comes along. I hope this isn't surprising anybody. The fundraising function in 2024 cannot be put in neutral until a new executive director is hired. And finally, boards are recalibrating into who we are. What's our role? What are we supposed to do? Interims are playing a huge role in asking some tough questions about changing board culture that actually has become toxic, or a good candidate is going to look at and go, I don't want anything to do with these people. And I know for those of you who've spent a number of years in the not-for-profit sector, this probably shouldn't be foreign. So, Jeffrey, what are you doing here? I signed up to Find About It Academy, not to hear someone get on their bandwagon. I agree with you. But as an academy, what I'm trying to show here on the screen is this isn't about how to come in and run an organization on a part-time basis. This is about real organizations that are struggling with a point in time in their evolution. And there are driving forces, both inside their organization and in society, that should not allow anybody to say, I become an interim executive director because I want to help to proliferate the status quo. How am I doing? How am I doing? I need to hear from somebody. I need somebody to say, Jeffrey, you guys have lost your mind. Or I need somebody to say, hey, Jeffrey, this is making sense. Now, Jocelyn, I have to tell you, because I can see your non-verbal cues here, I'm going to, with your kind permission, put you on the spot. What are you thinking as you hear this, Jocelyn? Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Jocelyn Helen. My pronouns are she and her, and I am up here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Jeffrey and I took a training with Jeffrey a few years ago now in Vancouver, and I've been eyeing up the academy for a while. No, I can't even, I worry about the toxicity in the nonprofit sector and how boards are not doing what they were set up to do. And, it's so wonderful to hear that. I was worried that the interim role would be more of a passive role. I'm inspired to hear that it is partly a change-making role, because I think those of us who are ready to do something a bit different for a while, part of it is because we need to change the sector from a different angle. And if interim is how we can be effective, then sign me up, because we gotta shake it up. There's great opportunities that we're missing, I think, in the sector, because we're in our own way, and board governance is a really big piece of that. So I'm inspired that it is. Oh, hold on to your hat. This is going to be an interesting ride.
Thank you so much, and I truly appreciate you allowing me to do a call out in a very strange setting. That's very helpful, because we're all in this together, everybody. And, we're all looking at this through different lenses. But this is a tough job. And Lori, I want to thank you for putting in the chat box that you're just completing your first interim position as an interim pastor. That is so cool. And all of those details of the landscape are right on. Lori, if you don't mind, I'd like to do a quick shout out Thanks for putting that in there. What's resonating with you, Lori?
The board culture, which was actually the most contentious part of what I dealt with in the past year and a half, but also the advocacy to activism, which is important in a congregation in some ways, but also fraught right now. I mean, I can't remember all the other points, but everyone, those resonated. I'm about to prepare to go to another congregation, and I'm appreciating your message that don't expect this to be the same. I mean, the context may be similar, but there will be new challenges. So it's good to have a little heads up there.
Thank you. And I so appreciate, Lori. A piece of trivia, the interim executive model is based on a 400-year-old model that was established by the Presbyterian Church that demanded interim leaders as part of their congregational mandates, is that between heads of congregation, there would be an interim. That was a denominational decree that dates now more than 400 years ago.
That's my tradition. I didn't know it was that old, though.
Yep, 1600s. So what you can see here is, how do you then work as a community to take all of this dynamic and turn it into a process that is owned by other people, but a process that is shepherded. And Lori, this is where the word comes from. It's a shepherding process of people coming along to understand what they want to be, so the next leader has been well defined to get them there. Truly, one of the reasons why our profession is so important is I want all of us to band together and get very concerned about the high level of attrition rate that exists in the not-for-profit sector. We have to think about how much charitable dollar is spent on executive vacancies, either preparing for them or cleaning them up. When we are good interims, we're helping organizations to find not a fast leader. We're helping organizations to have in their minds, not ours, their minds, the best leader for the next chapter of service that community wants to have in support of other people. And that's the beauty of this work, everybody. This is the joy of this job. This is why we are not consultants. This is why we are change makers. And what we teach in the academy, this is why we're innovative disruptors. This is why we have chosen a career of bringing innovative disruption to organizations that are trying to move with society and need some help in being able to be prepared to continue to serve society. All right, with that in mind, let's talk about the academy. This is the context by which we all come in. But I got to tell you, there's some harmful myths that destroy interim leadership. One of them is, I've run nonprofits for years. I can run nonprofits for a few months. Well, here's the thing. If you think this is about running an organization, we're missing the opportunity about facilitating evolution. This is not solely about running a nonprofit. This is about helping organizations and people on a shared vision to evolve and being successful at that. Some people go, well, you know what? Interims, that's just a status quo kind of job. I hope not. Because if your previous executive director really was in a toxic environment and fired and nothing changes, I can guarantee you, you're probably about ready to have a second round very soon. Number three, I'm a good consultant, so I'll be a great interim chief executive. That's not true. Consulting and interim leadership are two different things. One is the outside looking in, the other is the inside looking out. One leads into their strengths and the other better lead into their weaknesses. Because while you may not be a financial consultant, if you don't lean into getting to know an organization's finance, it will hurt everybody very soon. So consultants lean into their strengths, interim chief executives lean into their weaknesses. I'm going to use this interim gig as a foot in the door to get the full-time job. Well, that's not real helpful, because you stop being an innovative disruptor and you start becoming an aggressive candidate. And that's two different kinds of ball games. And an interim shouldn't get too involved in the organization. Really? Are you serious? You're going to be paid an executive director's position and you shouldn't get involved in the organization? Okay, let's think about that one for a while. So there's some myths that go with our industry that need to be thought about. How do you put this all together? So the Academy is built on 4 principles, and every time we meet, you will see these principles on the screen. When you read about the Academy in LinkedIn, when you look on our website, there are 4 words that describe this profession. Interim leadership is purposeful, it is methodical, it is profound, and ultimately it's transformational. And every organization will look at this in different degrees and use different words. But we're there because we are helping to advance a purpose. We're going to do it using a logic model. We're going to use some processes that typical execs don't use, because I'm not a typical exec. We're going to give you some suggestions of how to shake up an organization's processes so they can look at their infrastructural strengths and weaknesses from an experiential point of view, as opposed to a consultant saying to them there's a weakness. We're going to give people a different experience. And when you add all this up, it should be transformational. What we're doing is we are helping to bridge an organization's past with its future. And once that conversation has begun, we have to figure out then what is the best infrastructure and the best leader for that future to continue as our legacy. The Academy is built on models. It is not a group of people, as I'm doing today, we're not talking heads. We're going to have an 8-week program, and the Academy is built on the models of interim leadership. Let me show you what they are. Number 1, we believe that methodical interim leadership begins with a defined engagement. Everybody needs to know the expectations before you get there. You don't have time to establish yourself. There's an engagement phase that moves to diagnostics, that leads to planning. There is interventions. Then we're going to have a succession process to our successor or successors. And once they or them have been hired, then we will pivot. If you're wondering why this is an 8-week program, you're looking at it on the screen. We're going to spend 2.5 hours talking about how does an interim interview for a exec position that should be nothing like the successor is going to interview, because you're not a dress rehearsal for the successor. Most organizations do not know how to interview an interim. We're going to teach you how to teach them. The worst thing that can happen is a great interview with all the wrong expectations, because they've actually hired your successor. They haven't hired you. So each one of these is why we have an 8-week program. We use a medical model. We're going to address you and work with you as a type of a physician. You're going to provide specialized healthcare to an organization that's in need of care. And that care is based on 13 protocols. Over the 8 weeks, we will go through what is the right start for an interim versus the wrong start. And don't anybody place their bets here, but most interim gigs don't work well when they didn't start right, because you don't have time to do course correction when you're only there about 9 to 12 months. You want everybody to be on the course from day 1. These are the 13 protocols of interim management. They will manifest themselves in each organization differently. But I want you to notice that the executive job description doesn't happen at first. The executive job description happens at last, because a group of people have decided on what they need from a leader, which is very different from when you got there and they told you what you wanted in a leader. I often say a good interim helps a group of diverse people to move from what they want to agreeing on what they need. And if we can get to that place as professionals, think what we're doing to lower the attrition rate for the executive director positions in the not-for-profit sector. As physicians, you have a variety of interventions available to you, and we will talk about what is the appropriate role for interims around program, finance, the workplace culture, generating revenue. Oh, you know what? I'm an interim. I don't do fundraising. Really? That's going to be a problem. You know, I don't want to touch the diversity discussion. That's going to be a problem. I want to talk with the board. We have 6 interventions available to us to put through these protocols to do this strategy. Everybody, that's what the Academy is built on. It is a logic model so that we're providing profound processes in a methodical way that never loses focus that this is purposeful. And at the end of the day, it will be transformational for the people involved, the organization that's being served, and the communities that's going to benefit from this effort. And I think for most of us, that's why we got into this work. So at the conclusion, you join a community of people who have graduated and have a certificate from the Interim Executives Academy. We talk a standard, we talk a common language, and we have established together a set of standards. I did not say a set of mandates. What all of us need who are interims, and I needed this when I was an interim, I didn't have a navigation system. I didn't have a compass. I didn't even have a peer. I had a lot of competitors who thought they should have gotten the job, but that didn't do me any good. When I finally got into the position, I joined a social advocacy organization. And my first week on the job as an interim, I was pulling people out of the middle of the street because they were staging a sit-in. And I have to tell you, none of my previous positions had never equipped me for that kind of interim leadership before. I needed to have a navigation system. I needed to have somewhere I could turn. And I also needed peers and colleagues I could call. And that's some of the stuff that doesn't happen in the classroom. That happens because all of us are on the screen together. And my sincere hope is after you've been here today, you'll want to stay on this screen. And you're going to want to be the innovative disruptor that our sector so desperately needs. Let me stop here for a second. How am I doing? Do I get a thumbs up? People are like, oh boy, I don't know. How can you deliver on this thing? That's pretty big talk. Well, I'm happy to tell you this will be our 19th Academy. We have 600 people whose shoulders we stand on. And I have to tell you, we have interims today that are in such wonderful positions. I told you about an interim who's leading the American Studies Association. We just placed the interim executive director of Dress for Success, Tampa Bay, Florida, whose longtime executive director sadly passed away. And an organization was not prepared at all for that. We have a wonderful interim executive director who is working for changing the voice of environmentalism in the state of California. We have an interim executive director that's looking at race and poverty. We just have a brand new interim executive director of the United Way of Fresno County, an organization that's really struggling to re-identify itself. Look at these wonderful opportunities, everybody. Look at when you put it all together, what it sums up to. So having said that, let me move into the brass tacks. I am proud to tell you that, this is just a quick moment of show and tell that last year, this work was recognized by Managed HR Magazine as one of the top interim service providers in the United States. So what's my experience? All right, so Jeffrey, you kind of got my attention. I haven't signed off yet, but I'm pretty darn close. What do you have to sell here? Well, this is the story. It's 20 hours of classroom instruction. We meet from, now I'm going to speak in terms of the Pacific time zone because that's where I'm at, but I'm mindful that all of you are around the world. But we meet from 9:30 a.m. to noon in the Pacific time zone every week for 8 weeks. You will have access to a 180-page interim executive reference manual. We want you to have reference manual because what you write down in the class, we hope you'll get a reference manual when you get the job because it will take on a whole new meaning. The way you fill in the blanks as a student and the way you will fill in the blanks as a practicing interim will be two different things. Our sincere hope is that you want to use that manual several times. As part of the Academy experience, we also offer one additional program that's my favorite, and I call it Research to Practice. We're going to look at a most recent research that's been conducted in the nonprofit sector, and we're going to talk amongst ourselves, what does that say about our profession? So for example, if you choose to be in this academy, we're going to look at research that's been done on how do you measure employee belongingness and how do you begin to track diversity, inclusion, equity as a culture in an organization. What's the role of an interim based on those assessment tools, and what's the role of an interim with the data that we're now getting about the effectiveness of diversity programs? What does that mean for our profession? There's never the assumption that it means something, but we've agreed on that together as opposed to assume that it doesn't. So we'll have a research to practice. If you join us for the Fall Academy, the research to practice will be Board Source's brand new Leading with Intention, looking at what is the state of nonprofit boards in the United States. And what does the state of nonprofit boards mean to us as interims? We also run 2 Academy clinics. That's open spaces. You set the agenda, we don't. But the fun thing about the Academy clinics, it's open to all of our alumni. So, we can have a lot of people who want to talk about a couple of subjects that are really kind of like burning for them right now. And we love the clinics and hope you'll join us. Joan leads career planning study groups. If you've never been an interim before, how do I turn this into a career? We've created study groups on how to do that, how to build a brand, how to build a business, how to be one of us with a branded individuality, but also a branded profession. You'll be invited to join a LinkedIn group, and we have affinity groups based on both demographics as well as affinity groups based on geographics. You'll get a certificate and badge, and you'll also, if you'd like to be affiliated with us, because this is not a sales job, you'll take the class. If you want further affiliation with Third Sector Company and the Academy, we can talk to you about that. But that is not the role. This is not advocating to be one of us. This is a training program to enrich the sector with trained professionals to lead the sector where it needs to go. And I want to say that 100 times. This is not meant to be a commercial venture. It is very much one wanting to create a community based on curriculum. Who we are, we're a social purpose corporation. If we were in other communities, we'd be called a B Corp. I need to update this one. We actually have more than 500 academies now. We've had 1,300 registrations. We have 85 interim learning events a year. Third Sector is a member of 12 academies, associations, and we just added a new program for interim chief development officers because we want to also reduce the attrition of fundraisers that's occurring in this country and creating folks who want to be interim chief development officers. All right, everybody take a big breath. It's 52 minutes past the hour. Jeffrey, do you really talk this much? No, I like to share air. But I want to make sure that, we covered what you want to. So now at this point, Randy, Joan, Tom, what are we missing? And then I'm going to ask Dean to just say a few words as a recent graduate. What am I missing from a key bullet point standpoint?
I have nothing to add, Jeffrey.
Okay, Randy. Joan, what have I missed?
Jeffrey, one of the questions in the chat was just about how we admit people to the Academy, if there are application processes or prerequisites or requirements.
So we are, anybody who wants to learn this practice, we are a totally equitable organization. We also offer scholarships because we do not want economic barriers. We want to make sure that the sector has a diverse group of people that are not held back by economic barrier to become interim executive directors. Our profession alone is economically difficult because it is episodic income. And so by nature, it is a privileged program. This academy is not going to be a privileged process. If you'd like to learn about interim work, there's room at the table. If you need financial help to do that, there's room at the table. If you have an interest in this because you don't want to be an interim yourself, but because you want to learn a process to help organizations as a volunteer, there's room at the table. We welcome you to get into community, to be an innovative disruptor, to help organizations be what they want to become. Joan, did I answer the question to your satisfaction? Would you add anything to that?
No, that's perfect. Thank you. The other, there have been several questions in the chat, and you just talked about the fact that this is an educational offering, not necessarily a vocational offering, but there have been several questions about third sector's placement activity, referral activity. Maybe just a couple sentences to tie that up a little bit.
Sure. First of all, I want to iterate that we're not offering the academy because we're looking for trained interims to make money off of. This is not earning money off people's backs. What we are doing is we're offering an academy for people who want to study this profession and create a community for them to which to do that. We are a learning institution, and for those of you who have graduated from a institution of higher learning, you probably know there's something called a placement office for the graduates. And are you familiar with that concept? You know what? because you're very proud of your graduates. And if you choose to be our customer, I'm going to be very proud of you. We only represent graduates of our academy. Therefore, we operate as a placement office. We do not put together a list of people who kind of want to do this work and then, make money because we did a good referral. What we're going to do is when people contact us and say, we'd like a good intern, we're going to say, we have graduates that we would like to recommend to you. We need to go through an intake process, and we will do placement. Third sector company will place about 40 interims a year. If there are already 100 of you, do the math. But we also know that you will want to do one of two things. You may want to do this on your own, or you may say, I do my work through the academy because I want access to all those resources. And I think that you will want access to those resources, and you'll do it through us. Joan, what am I missing?
That's good. Thank you.
Tom, is there anything you'd like to add to this conversation? Because I want to make sure that your voice and your perspective as a third sector teammate has been acknowledged.
Thanks, Jeffrey. No, I don't have much more to add to the content, but I am putting a link here in the chat if anyone's interested in looking at more details about the upcoming academy in June.
So, I'm excited to just introduce someone to take just a couple of minutes because we only have 4 minutes left here to just say, you know what? I was in your shoes not even a year ago, and I was thinking about taking this academy, and I did. Everybody, I want you to welcome Dean Hanks from Tacoma, Washington, who just graduated from class 18 as we get ready for class 19. Dean, what would you say about why in the world did you go through this darn academy?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be with you this morning and all the folks on the screen here. I've had a long career in not-for-profits, leadership roles in United Local, United Ways, arts organizations, Goodwill, other organizations. And initially, I wasn't sure what the 8 weeks of the academy would bring to my my next journey. But I've known Jeffrey for quite a while back in his United Way days, and I really felt confident that this has been built out over the 20 years, and it was a different kind of learning experience. So I signed up, and after getting the workbook and seeing the depth of study for each week, it really became apparent this is truly a full-blown learning opportunity that would challenge me, challenge the other members of the cohort I was in, as I looked at what the next phase of my career could be. As each week unfolded, it was truly a much deeper and sort of thoughtful approach to moving not-for-profits forward. As has been pointed out, some of us have this opinion this was just a caretaking kind of interim thing where, you plug in there, you keep the ship upright, pay the bills, take care of the staff. And it was completely opposite of that. It was so important to have a more profound sense of what strategic transformational leadership is like. And over the 8 weeks, it really became inculcated into us in the cohort that this is really what we were learning about. And what you could do with that, what an organization could become. The other thing I would say to you is much like today, but we really became close as a cohort. There's a lot of small group interaction that Jeff makes sure is happening in the classes. You hear from folks all over the country in a more intimate level. We shared ideas. I've added 20 plus LinkedIn, connections from around the country. Have a network of folks here right in the Puget Sound that I'm more closer to after going through this. So, it creates a whole learning environment. The last thing I would say, in terms of if you're thinking about this, it was really time very well spent. The 2.5 hours is loaded, it's jam-packed. As I say, the small group stuff was very stimulating intellectually. The stuff that's presented is really profound in terms of challenging your current thinking. And it was really a learning about a new thing, this transitional strategic leadership and what it can do for organizations. The last thing as a committed not-for-profit professional, which I'm sure folks are on the screen are in the same boat, how you can be an asset to these organizations and ultimately to your community that you serve. Each of you, and like in my cohort, you have a wealth of experience and talent, and you're committed to this sector. And it can make such a difference for organizations when you go in with, after going through the academy, with the right approach to this. It was just, to me, it became an ideal scenario for those of folks looking at shorter term, very impactful assignments that allow you to continue to make a difference. And it was really, truly a blessing for me to be able to go through the 8 weeks. So I want to thank Jeff and the whole team for putting together such a great academy. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dean. Well, we're at 59 minutes past the hour, and when we say an hour of your valuable time, we're going to hold us to it. If there's anybody who has a pressing question that is, really kind of, I need to have this question answered before I make a decision whether this is right for me or not, you're welcome to stay afterwards. I don't want any questions to not be appreciated or recognized, but I also want to make a promise that when we say we have a 1 hour class, you can bet we're going to hold to that. Everybody, thank you for being here. I hope I have a chance to see you at an academy. It's amazing what we can accomplish together. We're going to be the kind of solutions we hoped were in place when we were executive directors. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Have a great day.